Dennis Young here, Primitive Substance, Series 2. And today I have a very special guest, bassist extraordinaire, politician, author, and all the way from the UK, Bill MacCormick. Bill, thank you for doing this.
It's a pleasure. Pleasure to be here.
So let's go back to your early days of growing up when you got interested in the bass and music.
Well, I got interested in music before I even touched a bass guitar.
Okay.
Learning to being a bass player was completely accidental.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so yeah, I mean, I obviously in the '60s, the Beatles, everything. Suddenly, all these things changed. There was sort of West Coast scene as well, all the bands from there,
Right.
and um, I don't think I ever really thought about being a musician, though I was constantly listening to music until a chance meeting with a guy called Robert Wyatt.
How about
And
that? Oh, yeah. I know him
his,
very well. Know that name.
yeah, well, it's a kind of complete coincidence. His mother and my mother worked in the same school, and
Oh, okay.
near to where I went to school. And my mum said to Robert's mum one day, "Oh, I've got two boys. They're both very interested in music." And she said, "Oh, my son's in a pop group," as she described Soft Machine.
That's funny.
You must come round. So we all went round, including my parents, who were a bit bewildered by what they found. And the whole of the band, Soft Machine, was living in Robert's mother's house in a place called West Dulwich, near
Right.
where I went to school. And the front room was their rehearsal room. So they had all their drum kits and organs
Right.
and what else. And the girlfriends lived there, and there were babies, and the front of the house had been painted in psychedelic colors and everything else.
Oh, wow.
My parents found that a sort of a bit eye-opening, given the fact that this was completely new to them. We just thought this was great, and we had lunch with them, and Robert met Robert and some of the other members of the band, and then Robert at the end said, "Well, if you're ever passing, pop in, for a cup of tea."
How
Well,
about that?
so happened it was on my route home, so I used to pop in pretty much every day.
Oh, my gosh. That must have been extraordinary. That's
Well,
something.
I abused his hospitality, and but he was true to his word. He supplied me with copious cups of tea, and he gave me an education, particularly in jazz.
Okay.
Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Eric Dolphy, Charlie Mingus. It was on the record player in Robert's room all the time, and I didn't really know that stuff. And it was a big eye opener as far as I was concerned. So, and then I saw the band play their first ever gig at
Oh, man. With
at a
David Allen in the band at that time?
David,
How about
Mike,
that?
and Robert, and yeah. So that was the original sort of four-piece, and they played a party in a house in a place called Kingston in southwest London,
Okay.
owned by the Sufis, the sort of the religious grouping,
Oh, okay.
and they, I thought,
Hmm.
like, this looks good. Being in a band, yeah, sounds good to me. So when I went back to school, I started looking around and talking to people. And ironically, a person I spoke to, my father and his father already knew one another, and
Okay.
because they both worked in the airline business. And his son was at Dulwich as well, and his son was called Philip Target Adams, better known as Phil Manzanera,
Oh,
uh,
yeah. I know him too, of course.
Roxy Music,
Yep.
and all
Yep.
sorts of other things. So Phil and I got together, and we had a floating population of various people who wanted to be in a rock and roll band, and we were the first rock band at our school. And we played all various gigs at lunchtime and in the afternoons and everything else around the school. And we played a few parties nearby,
Hmm.
playing sort of covers of Jefferson Airplane numbers and the Doors and a few blues things. A song called Born in Chicago by the Butterfield Blues Band. And that was our sort of introduction. I was the singer. I
Oh, okay.
didn't play bass. And then back in 1969, Phil and I both left school. And we had, by this stage, we got a drummer, a guy called Charles Hayward.
Oh, I know him very well. I interviewed him.
Yeah, Charles, brilliant,
Oh,
fantastic.
great guy. Great drummer.
Absolutely brilliant drummer. We were very fortunate. Somebody told us, he said, "Look, there's this guy 3 years below you at the school. and he's a good drummer. So we said, okay, he's in. We have never met him. He's in. He's got a drum
He's
kit.
in.
He knows how to play. He's in. And he was with us all the way through that. And then we left before he did. So Phil and I went off and got a few sort of day jobs and everything else just to sort of tide things over. And then Charles left, and we got together and we formed a band which we called Quiet Sun.
And I have that right here. Right there.
That's the one. Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
I have a copy of it. Oh, yeah.
And the problem we had was we obviously very heavily influenced now by the Soft Machine version with Robert, Mike Ratledge, and Hugh Hopper. The band formed after the band had been on tour in '68, supporting Jimi Hendrix around the States. And of course, then David had already left. Kevin then departed, and they would have broken up. But Hugh was a very good bass player, and of course, he'd been their roadie. And so the three of them joined up, and they started to play. And so I, in 1969, I went and watched them play everywhere in London and a few places further beyond. And so the Quiet Sun was very heavily influenced by what the Soft Machine were doing. So then, of course, the Soft Machine decided they were going to have a brass section. So they got in a trumpeter, a trombonist, and two sax players. Didn't play together for very long. It was too expensive. So Quiet Sun, if Soft Machine had got a brass section, we need a sax player. So we recruited a sax player, guy who just left the British Army, British Grenadier Guard bandsman or something like that.
No.
And the real problem we had, and then we found a keyboard player, and Dave Jarrett. And Dave was actually from the same school as us, but about 3 or 4 years older. And he answered an advert we put into a music paper. And the one problem we couldn't do is we could not find a bass player.
Oh, okay.
So, with the arrogance of a sort of 19-year-old with more confidence than talent, I said, well, look, it's only got 4 strings. It can't be that difficult to play. I'll learn the bass parts so that we can carry on rehearsing. And, eventually we'll find a bass player. And then I can revert to what was going to be actually sort of like a cross between the Soft Machine and the Grateful Dead. We were going to have 2 drummers.
Oh, okay.
Charles and me. And we never found a bass player. So I just carried on doing it for the next 10 years. So it was accidental. I had no intentions of being a bass player, but I ended up doing it.
Well, your playing really shows it. I mean, you've just a natural. Those are some great bass parts on those records. Fantastic. And
I think, carry on. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So one of the fact is, I went into it and I hadn't played all the blues pieces and all the sort of soul, so I had no background in the things that people just naturally fell back on when you're a musician. You've got some might call them cliches, but a little routine of lines that you can employ. I didn't have any of that, so I had to literally make it up as I went along. I didn't sort of start learning those until quite a few years later. But actually, I was far better in my view as a musician when I improvised than I was when I had to stick to a part. So there we go.
Well, let me show you this record.
Ah.
Oh, what a great record! Produced by Robert Fripp, no less.
Yeah.
Really something. How did that come about?
Well, the first match, Quiet Sun broke up in 1971, in the sort of early summer of 1971. We just couldn't get any interest from the music business. But one of the last gigs we ever played was at a place called Portsmouth Polytechnic. And we were supporting a band called Symbiosis. And Symbiosis was like a pickup band of jazz musicians. Okay. And it had a floating population, so you never quite knew who was going to be playing any one gig. But one of the people who was playing with it at that time was Robert.
About that. I didn't know that.
So Robert, that was the first time that Robert ever saw me play. And so we did our set, then Symbiosis came on, and at the end of it, they finished a bit early. And so Robert said, oh, look, we've got half an hour left. Why don't we have a jam? Quiet Sun, why don't you come back on stage and we'll all play together, which we duly did.
Right.
That was my, as it were, first exposure to Robert actually as a bass player. He didn't know anything about it before. So then he got thrown out of Soft Machine, and Quiet Sun had broken up. I had a day job, very boring one too. And something out of the blue, I got a phone call saying, look, from Robert saying, I want to get some guys together, see what comes up, basically, see what happens. And so, would you like to turn up and give it a try? So, we had a house in a place called Notting Hill, just round the corner from a recording studio, quite a famous recording studio. It was initially Island Studios, then became Basing Street Studios. A lot of albums.
Right, that is a famous place.
Literally, I mean, 50 yards from Robert's place. So downstairs he had what was called a muse. So it had a garage at the bottom and a couple of floors above it.
Oh, okay.
Garage was where we rehearsed, so it was full of equipment. And so we went in there, and Robert then introduced me to the other two guys he invited along, which was a guy called Phil Miller, guitar player, who'd been with a band called Delivery with his brother Steve, and Dave Sinclair, who was previously being the keyboard player with Caravan.
Right. I know those bands.
So we just messed around for a couple of months. But Robert was still contracted to CBS as a result of his deal with Soft Machine.
Right.
And CBS said, no, we're going to keep him to it. So, okay, so we went and recorded the first album in December and January 1971-72 in a studio, CBS studio, which was falling apart. Because they were building a brand spanking new one. We were about the last band to use it. And there was going on at that time in Britain, there was a dispute with miners. So there was power cuts going on. So the studio would suddenly go dark. You couldn't record anything. The equipment didn't work properly. It was pretty dreadful. And it took us about usually for an album at that time, which you could usually knock out in about 2 weeks, it took us about 3 months to finish it.
Holy smoke.
So then we went on and played, and Dave Sinclair eventually decided that we were too jazz orientated for his liking. So he got another keyboard player, a guy called Dave McRae, who's a fantastic New Zealander. Used to play with, for example, in the States, he played with Buddy Rich and his orchestra.
Oh, really? Wow. This
man was seriously. And then he started writing, and so we all started composing. Because the first album, the first Matching Mole album, basically is really a Robert Wyatt solo album. The only real Matching Mole album is the Little Red Record, because we all did. And then we were scheduled to go in and record it in July and August 72. And Robert said, I'd like you to meet somebody because I think you'd be good as a producer. And so we turned up to rehearsals, and there was Mr. Fripp.
How about that? Of all people, right?
Yeah, he had chat and everything else.
Yeah.
So he's a nice guy. And so we said, okay, all right, let's do this. And so we turned up by now we actually managed to get into the brand new CBS recording studio.
Oh, that must have been nice.
Which was beautiful. I mean, it's fantastic.
Wow.
Really well equipped. And Robert Fripp did the production, and on one of the songs that I wrote, a thing called Gloria Gloom, I decided I just met Brian Eno.
How about that?
Because I went, Phil invited me down to a place in Piccadilly, Command Studios, where Roxy were recording their first album.
Right.
I met Mr. Eno there, and I saw what he was doing with his computers and synthesizers and stuff. And I said, well, look, I'd like some sound effects on this track. So he came in and did that. And as far as I'm aware, actually, that's the first time that Fripp and Eno worked together. And actually,
how about that?
They realized, what each one was up to.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that was enjoyable. And
now, he had that EMS synthesizer, right? That at that time, right? That where you opened up a case, and there was
it's a VCS3.
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was. Yes, it was literally opened up like a case. It had a board you plugged things into to link all the various modules up to it. Yes,
ahead of his time.
Oh yeah, he was brilliant. I mean, I loved what he was doing. I actually got to know Brian, pretty well. I stayed at his place a few times and had long chats with him. He's a very, very nice guy, and obviously that extended through the 70s because I did some stuff.
Now, did that record work? Was that a fast record to do? Because I read or watched interviews where Robert works really fast.
Well, this one was. Thankfully, all the strikes and power cuts had finished, so we actually recorded the second album very quickly. Okay. So we had in fact, we did it in a few stages, but we did it basically in about 2 weeks, and then we went on tour and our manager was also the manager of Soft Machine.
Hmm.
So he decided that to rationalize everything, it would be good if we all went on tour together. So we did a tour supporting Soft Machine around Belgium and Holland. Altogether sure how Robert felt about the fact that we were supporting the band that he'd started and named.
Right.
Might have been a bit fraught, and the album still wasn't out at that point.
Oh, okay.
And then we played a gig in a place in northern Holland called Groningen. And the next morning we got out, ready to get home. And Robert said, I'd like to have a chat. And we all got together in the restaurant to have breakfast. And he said, I'm breaking the band up.
Oh,
So
oh boy.
that was it. So Matching Bowl was at an end. The album came out about 3 weeks later and actually got very good reviews. I think Robert felt under pressure because he said, it's a responsibility. We've got to earn enough money so everybody can, eat and have somewhere to live. And that had been a bit of a problem. And because I'd had a job before Matching Mole was formed, I actually helped pay people's rent.
Oh, how about that?
I was the youngest member of the band, but I was actually helping everybody else out because I was the only one who had any money. And we weren't.
That's I've only seen one on YouTube. I've only found one Matching Mole concert with Robert had this mask on.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the only. Did he always wear that mask for the?
No, that was a one-off. Yeah, that was for.
That was strange.
French TV program called Rock and Stock.
Oh, that's right. That's the only time I've seen you Matching Mole play live.
Yeah, that was odd. We didn't know he was going to do that. None of the equipment, apart from Phil's guitar and my guitar, none of the equipment was ours. It was actually.
Oh, about that.
We used there's a guy called Pete Brown who was the lyricist for Jack Bruce and Cream.
Oh boy!
He had a band called Piblocto, and they were playing, so we used their equipment for that one gig. There are a couple of other performances on video.
I'll have to look for that.
There's one which is very difficult to get hold of. We did a tour in April and May supporting John Mayall, the late John Mayall.
Oh yeah.
And we played in Paris at the place called the Olympia, and French TV were actually more interested in us than they were in him. So they recorded it and they interviewed us backstage. And if you search, it's on. You can download it off the French TV's website. Okay. And then also there was a thing called the Inner London Education Authority. And they had turned a school into a recording studio and a video studio.
Oh, okay.
And we did a sort of 15. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I have to say, it's 15 minutes of your life you'll never get back. But that is available on.
Oh, okay, I got to look for that. Everybody out there should look for it because it's classic stuff.
It's horrible, frankly.
Yeah, but you guys were very unique and ahead of its time. Maybe that's why.
This was just no, I can't listen to. It's one of about the only thing that I've ever done that I just really cannot listen to.
Now I got to show you a record I never get tired of.
Yeah,
never get tired of. I found this in the 80s in a record store, and it is phenomenal. Third Uncle, every song is just. Yeah, it was Simon Phillips. What a drummer!
Oh, Phillips. Simon was amazing. Simon. I mean, we were very fortunate because there was a sort of Roxy was on hiatus, so Phil had plenty of time to do things, and he and Phil and my late brother Ian, we were writing with Phil, composing for this album that didn't come out until '77, but we've been doing sessions all over the scattered.
Okay.
And we were struggling to find the right drummer, basically. We tried Bill Bruford.
You did? Okay.
We did some stuff with that. Didn't quite gel. Don't know why. We also used a guy called Dave Maddox.
I know him. I've heard of him.
Fairport Convention and
right.
He was very good on the things that we used him for. He was brilliant. He's lovely, fantastic player. And eventually the engineer, a guy called Rhett Davis, who went on
I've heard of him.
With all sorts of people, including Roxy and sort of later. He said, "Well, look, I've got this. I know this young guy. He's 17, but he's a very good drummer."
Wow.
Yeah. So he said, "Do you want to should we get him in?" And Simon came in, set up this enormous white double bass drum kit, you know, huge, and we just went, oh my God, what a, you know,
He just blew it away on that
oh,
show. Oh my gosh.
he was a
Intense.
star. He was, and such a lovely guy as well.
Oh, that's even better yet.
I mean, his background. I mean, because of course his father was a big band leader in the 50s.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And actually, Simon got time off school on occasions to play drums with his dad's band.
How about that? Well, he was only 17 on that record.
He was 17, yeah.
Oh my God,
unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. So anyway, we were recording, and we got him in, and he did probably 2/3 of the tracks on what became the album. And then Phil suddenly out of the blue said, "Look, you know, this has been fun." And we also had a keyboard player who we were working with, who I'd met back in 1972, a guy called Francis Monkman.
Oh, I've heard of him.
Yeah, Francis was originally with a band called Curved Air. And
yeah, I know them.
Yeah, and they had sort of very distinctive first album. It was done on see-through plastic, and it had all sorts of patterns included, and it was all very fancy. A lot of money invested in it by their record.
Sure.
And Francis was a classically trained keyboard player, guitar player as well. But he wanted to sort of improvise and everything else. And I met him in '72 after Matching Mile broke up, because he did a recording session for the BBC with Robert Wyatt.
Okay.
And Francis and I met, and we hit it off, and we'd go. Now he liked really good proper Chinese meal food, so he'd disappear off down to the sort of the Docklands and find these strange looking Chinese restaurants and have dumplings and all sorts. And he liked to play chess, and he liked to drink tea, so he'd meet at the Ceylon Tea Centre and everything else. So I'd known him, and then so when we're doing this album, I said to Phil, let's get Francis in, because technically he's just outstanding. And so he was playing there, and so Phil sort of turned up one day and said, look, you know, I think it would be nice if we played some gigs together. And we've lined up a series of festivals in Europe, particularly in France, and the money's going to be really good, so we'll all make a decent amount, and that'll be the summer, and then we'll finish the album off in the autumn. So that was the plan. So everybody agreed to it, and so Simon and Francis and me and Eno, surprisingly, and Phil. And then Phil knew Lloyd Watson, who was a slide guitar player and singer, because he had been the support act on a couple of Roxy Music tours.
Right.
He'd won a competition for a newspaper called The Melody Maker for sort of the best newcomer.
How about that?
And Lloyd sadly died a few years ago, 3 or 4 years back. But, you know, once again, great player and lovely man. And so we rehearsed. We rehearsed at the Island offices in St. Peter's Square in Hammersmith. And before that, Phil and Brian and myself and my brother went, and we did the classic get your head together in the country routine. We went down to a small cottage on the Welsh border, and we
nice.
kicked around idea, what songs would we play?
Right.
And we decided that we needed to, apart from doing stuff from Phil's catalogue and Brian's catalogue, we also needed to do something a bit out there. So, but we couldn't work out what it was. And my claim is that it was my idea that we should do Tomorrow Never Knows.
That's good. Okay.
So I'm claiming that one.
Great suggestion.
Well,
that's great version.
Worked pretty well. So then we rehearsed, and it was going really well. And then there was a festival going on at a place called Orange in France.
Right.
And there was a riot at the festival. And the French president at the time, a gentleman called Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, decided that all festivals were going to be cancelled. So this was all the gigs that we were going to do, all the money we were going to make had gone. So the only thing we were left with was a warm-up gig in a little fishing village on the coast of Norfolk, the Marquee Jazz and Blues Festival at Reading, and then this gig at the Queen Elizabeth Hall, which is the one that we recorded. And basically Phil said, well, look, you know, we'll record it and put it out, and we'll try and make some of the money back that way. So we played 3 gigs. The third was recorded. It was, I think we turned it around I think it was released 3 weeks after we recorded it.
Oh, wow, that quick, huh?
Yeah, well, we recorded it at the beginning of September. It was released at the beginning of October. Wow. And And that was
That was
yeah,
it, huh?
801. And then,
Phenomenal record.
yeah, well, and there was some actually. It's 2 years time. Well, next year is the 50th anniversary of the Quiet Sun album, and the year
Oh,
after
wow.
that is the 50th anniversary of the 801 live album.
Oh man, that's
There
all.
will be things to recognize this coming out.
Oh, you're
We
gonna have a
do we do
box
have
set or some.
well we've what we've got with 801 is we've got one, two, three or four sound check tracks
Whoa,
which have not been used.
I can't
So
wait to hear that.
and we've also got the multi tracks back. So we actually
Oh man, that's gonna be great.
so I'm trying to persuade Phil, and he seems to be quite open to it. I want to do it's like a reworking of Tomorrow Never Knows, because there's all sorts of sound effects that you don't really get to hear on the album,
Right.
and extended intros, and there's bits that we edited out just because of time considerations on vinyl. So all that's going to go, and then next year, hopefully, Quiet Sun is going to have. Not just the album out and some other material, but an album out, some other material, and some new material which we are currently writing.
Oh,
So
that's really a thing. Wow, that sounds great. All the fans out there are gonna love that new
well,
material. Wow, that's great. So you're
so
going in the studio. That's
everybody's working on
great.
it.
Is
So that's,
Mr. Eno going to be involved with this also?
I don't know about that. I don't know, but certainly the Quiet Sun album. It's the original 4 members. So it's me and Phil and Charles Hayward and Dave Jarrett. We had a Zoom.
Oh, that's great.
Scattered all over the place in England. We had a Zoom meeting about 6 weeks back, and we sort of talked through what we were going to do and how it was going to work and what the timetable needed to be. So we've all been told that we have to go and write a 5-minute piece of music, and then it's got to be recorded and it'll come out next year.
I'm sure you guys could pull that off. All the talent there in the room.
Those 3, it's not so bad because they're all still musicians. I mean, I haven't played a bass guitar since 1980.
Well, you'll pick it up in a minute with those guys around.
Well,
so now I want to go to 78 with a band called Random Hole.
Yeah.
And I got to see you guys at the Palladium in New York City, and you guys opened up for Peter Gabriel.
Yeah.
And that's when I saw you guys play, and you guys were really with David Rhodes on guitar.
That's right. Yeah.
And what I loved about that gig was Peter came out before the show and introduced you guys and said, listen to this band. And I always thought that was great of Peter to always say something about his opening act. That must have been a great tour.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Peter is just one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. It's odd because, I mean, I really didn't like Genesis when he was in the band.
Okay.
Actually, ironically, some considerable time later, beginning of the 2000s, I was running Phil's website, Phil Manzanero's website.
Okay.
And the gentleman who was Genesis's manager back when we were signed, because we were signed to his company for publishing purposes, Random Hold, spoke to Phil and said, "Are you making any money out of your website?" And Phil said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, how do you do it?" And he said, "Well, don't ask me, ask Bill, because he's running it for me."
Okay.
So I got this phone call from Tony Smith, who I hadn't seen in 20 years. And he said, right, the Genesis website's doing nothing. It's sitting there. It's not. Would you like to, take it over? And I went, oh, okay. So I met up with Phil Collins and Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks, and we sort of discussed things.
Right.
Well, understandably, who is this man? A bit nervous about all of this, particularly Phil Collins in particular. And I said, well, look, all I can tell you is that I used to be a musician, and I can tell you also that in about August 1972, we were playing a festival at a place called Montbéliard in eastern France.
Right.
And he said, and Genesis were on the bill. And Phil went, Montbéliard. He said, I always thought it was Montpellier.
How about that?
He's the record keeper of Genesis. He has everything.
Oh, okay.
He has all the desk tapes, you name it. Phil,
okay.
He's the archivist of Genesis. So he went, oh, that's great. And I said, yeah. And we were on immediately before you. And he went, okay. And I said, and I was given the option of driving overnight with the road crew to Rotterdam or staying behind, watching you and staying in Montbéliard and driving the following day. And he went, yeah. He said, I went to Rotterdam. And he went, ah. I said, sorry, I just didn't like it.
Oh, about that. And
He
what did
said,
you say to that? That must have been like, what?
so he
You're
thought it
doing
was
my website and you don't
yeah.
like me?
So I ended up running the Genesis website and his website actually for about 7 or 8 years. So anyway, so Random Hold, yes, back to Random Hold. So Random Hold, was once again, strangely enough, Phil, Charles, Haywood, Dave Jarrett, and I all went to the same school.
Okay.
So did a guy called Simon Ainley, who sang on the Listen Now album, and also a bit on K-Scope, and toured with the Listen Now album in 1977. Random Hold was made up of David Ferguson, David Rhodes. They both went to the same school as me. So we all in that period, we all went to the same school.
Oh, how about that?
They formed Random Hold because they were at the 801 concert in the Queen Elizabeth Hall in 76 and hated it.
Oh, okay.
Thought it was unadventurous. So they decided they would go out there. And for a couple of years, they, as a result, made absolutely no money and got absolutely nowhere. Simon, the guy who'd been singing on the Listen Now album, he then joined that band. And eventually, Phil then went back because Roxy reformed to record Manifesto.
Okay.
So there was nothing for me to do. So I went off and I joined it as well. And we weren't really getting anywhere very much. And eventually I got a journalist who I knew in London to write an article. I had no idea how big it would be, but it was a magazine called The Melody Maker, which was one of the biggest selling music newspapers.
Of course.
And eventually when it turned up, I opened we got, for a band with no recording contract, no management, no publishing contract, we had both center pages running onto a third page.
Oh my gosh! Wow,
unprecedented.
And then you got Peter Hamill to produce it.
Well, suddenly, of course, all the record labels who didn't want to know us, they were falling over themselves just because they thought, God, if they can get all this coverage.
How about that?
So and we played a gig in London, and when we finished, the 3 people stayed behind, and the 3 people turned out to be Tony Smith, who was the manager of Genesis, a lady called Gail Colson, who was the manager of Peter Gabriel.
Right, I know, right.
And the third person was Peter Gabriel. And Peter had been told by a friend of his about us. So he came along and he persuaded them, Gail and Tony, to come too. And so we ended up being signed up by Gail's management company, publishing by Tony Smith and Hit and Run Music. Right. And the idea was that Peter was going to produce the album.
Oh, okay.
He really wanted to do it.
Know that.
And we went down to his place in Bath, the Random Hold was, and we actually sort of played around with some of the songs that then became the next album. But really what that was Peter wanted a very close look at Dave Rhodes, because he wanted David to play on the album and in an ideal world play on the tour as well. So we did that, but unfortunately then he had a contractual obligation to record a new album, so he wasn't available. Peter Hamill was part of the same agency as Peter Gabriel and us, so Gail Colson suggested him. Peter, very nice man. Didn't work. Yeah, it didn't work as far as I was concerned. The recording, we had a fantastic time. We recorded the album over a 2-week period in a recording studio called Startling. Startling was owned by Ringo Starr.
Oh, okay.
Startling was in the house that John Lennon and Yoko Ono lived in, where they recorded Imagine.
Oh, wow.
It's all there.
Wow.
In the hallway, there was an upright piano with a little brass plaque on the side of it. John Lennon wrote Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds on this piano in 1967.
Oh, man.
It was a living recording studio. So they had a cook. It was unbelievable. So we had a great 2 weeks. And actually that worked really well. But then we went away and mixed it and basically I was used to being in the studio with Phil and Brian Eno, when
Right,
everyone
right.
was able to put their ideas in and make suggestions. And it was clear that Peter Hamill didn't want that, so
Ah, it's too
I,
bad.
I stopped. I didn't go to the mixing at all. And then we toured. We toured initially in this country with an English band called XTC.
I love them. Wow, that must have been something.
They were
Back in
lovely.
the early days, they were great.
That was at the time when they had the single Making Plans for Nigel,
Oh yeah,
which I think probably their biggest hit single. I mean,
right.
lovely, great musicians, lovely
Oh
people.
yeah, I'm sure.
And then by that stage, Peter had finished recording the third solo album,
Right.
and so he said, "Right, I want to have Random Hold as my support act." We went, "Oh, great!" So Peter's the sort of guy who wants to enjoy touring. So he said he invited me into the office up in central London. And he said, "Right, what we need is the Good Hotel Guide, which I've got here, and a map of England," he said, or a map of UK. He said, "What we're going to do is we're going to find the best hotels,
There you go.
and then the nearest city, and we'll organise a gig in the city nearest to the best hotels, not the other way around. We'll do." So we went and we found all these fantastic
That's
hotels.
great.
And then we said, "Okay, well, okay, so what's this near to?" "Oh, that's near Edinburgh." "All right, we'll play Edinburgh." So we did the tour of England with him, and Scotland, Wales, and it was great.
Boy, that must have been fun.
And then we went off to the States, and we did that tour in sort of August 1980,
Look at that.
which they started in LA and ended in Philadelphia at the Tower Theatre.
Oh, okay.
And I recorded the last, well, it was basically a cassette tape. I recorded the last gig, and then back in about 25 years ago, I arranged to have that added to a version of the original Random Hold album. So there's like a 25-30 minute live section as well. So there's a couple of CDs of basically everything.
Oh, there is. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, people still sell them. I never see any money, but anyway.
Oh boy, that's the music business, I'll tell you. But you were part of some amazing music. We're running out of time. Could we do a part 2 maybe on more on your going into political life, your book, and then whatever in between here, because this has been a great interview, Bill. And so if we could get together again, because we got a lot more material we could go over.
Yeah, no, that's fine by me.
Do it.
Yeah, whatever
okay.
you want.
So everybody out there, subscribe, come to this channel and see great interviews like this. So this is some great stuff, Bill. So we'll see you again. We'll do part 2 coming up soon.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thanks for allowing me to visit with you all.
Okay, we'll see you soon. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.